Hi. In this film, I'm going to talk about modes. Now, you may have heard about modes, especially if you're into playing jazz. Lots of jazz musicians spend their lives talking about modes and how to play in modes. I'm going to go back in history for a few minutes to a time before major and minor keys. Now, if you're used to playing music in major and minor keys, you might be under the impression that they've been around forever, but they haven't really, because it was only in the years from about 1600 that we started to write music in major and minor keys. But if we go back before 1600 into a time called the Renaissance period, or into a time before that called the medieval period, we find composers are writing their music using modes. Now, this all sounds very complicated, I'm sure, but it's not as complicated as it seems. Let's just have a little exploration of what these modes are. And I'm going to start with a mode that we will all instantly recognize. If I start on C and I go up to the next C, that sounds to us like a scale of C major. Okay, but C to C, just using the white notes like that, was originally called the Ionian mode. So if you use those notes from C to C, that's the Ionian mode. Okay, well, that seems fairly straightforward, doesn't it? Now, what about if we use the notes from D to D? If we were going to play a scale that went from D to D, we'd quite likely put an F sharp and a C sharp in it. That's kind of what we're used to listening to. We might even hear a scale of D minor. But back in the days of modes, the D to D would have been on white notes like this. Sounds slightly strange to our ears, doesn't it? Especially this bit at the top there. But this is a mode that runs between D and D, just using the white notes on the modern piano. They didn't have pianos all those years ago, but we're just kind of thinking about this in terms of a modern keyboard. And D to D is the Dorian mode. And it does sound a little bit different, doesn't it? Because what we've done by putting an F sharp in it and a C sharp is actually we've transposed the Ionian mode, because in the Ionian mode it goes tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and in D major we do the same thing. We go tone, tone, so that means we need an F sharp, semitone, tone, 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 so that means we need a C sharp, semitone, so we need that C sharp to make the final semitone work. But if I just go white notes, I've changed that pattern, haven't I, of tones and semitones. So I'm going tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone, which is why the Dorian mode can sound a bit strange to our ears. You can even have chords. So that will be the Dorian mode. Sounds strange to us, doesn't it? We'd probably rather hear this. With the F sharp and the C sharp, but in the Dorian mode, it's quite a nice sound when you get used to it actually, but that's the Dorian mode. Now, you can of course go from E to E. And if I use the notes from E to E, I'm using something called the Phrygian mode. My goodness me. It sounds like something you put in the fridge, doesn't it? Phrygian mode. But this is the Phrygian mode, E to E. So it's the same principle. On the modern keyboard or the modern piano, it just means using the white notes. So there's the Phrygian mode running from E to E. Then, of course, there's going to be a mode running from F to F. And F to F is called the Lydian mode. Fun, these names, aren't they? So here's the Lydian mode. That one sounds very strange, doesn't it? We'd want to put a B flat in, wouldn't we, to make it a scale of F major. Which really, F major is just a transposed Ionian mode. But when you hear the Lydian mode with the B natural, a bit strange. So there's the Lydian mode. Okay, what's coming next? Guess what? It's G to G. And this is the Mixolydian mode. So G to G, Mixolydian mode, okay? That's what that one sounds like. You know, we're waiting for an F sharp, aren't we? To make it G major or the transposed Ionian mode. But here it is, the Mixolydian mode. So that's G to G. A to A. What's A to A all about? Well, A to A is about the Aeolian mode. Aeolian mode. And A to A sounds like this. Now that's the same as A natural minor as we know it, but there it is. That's the Aeolian mode. Quite an attractive mode to work in, actually. And then B to B is the last one before we get back to where we started, isn't it? And B to B is called the Locrian mode. So there we have it, B to B. I think that one does sound rather strange, doesn't it? So you can hear that some of these modes sound rather better than other modes. But in the years before 1600, before we got to major and minor keys, composers were working in these modes. And then during the late 1500s, composers started to kind of mess about with these modes. And they sort of said, well, if I was playing this, that I was illustrating earlier, they might say, well, you know, it sounds better with some C sharps. So they started adding in sharps and flats, what they called musica ficta. And by the time we get to 1600, the modes have got so kind of corrupted that really the whole system of major and minor keys evolve. But if you're listening to music before 1600, you might be hearing modes with a bit of musica ficta in. And if you go back a bit further, you might be hearing modes on their own. And you might be thinking there's something about this sounds a bit strange. And it will be because those patterns of tones and semitones are not what we are expecting with major and minor keys, but they're the pattern that's given to us by those modes. You could transpose a mode, or you could do all sorts of things to it, and you could do things with modes starting on different places in the scale, and we have things called the hyper Dorian mode and things. Let's not worry about that for now, but that's the basic system of modes, and it will help you to access this music before 1600, and the jazzers will be able to give you their perspective on modes as well.